Way back when I was first playing Pokemon Gold and Silver and I eventually unlocked Mount Silver, I found this cool looking Pokemon in the grass. And that Pokemon was Larvitar. At that point in the game, you're really just trying to fill in your Pokedex, but seeing this thing go from Larvitar to Pupitar to Tyranitar was still pretty awesome. And I ended up using a mod cartridge like Game Shark to get Larvitar as my starter. Back then, however, I wasn't trying to solo the game with just that Pokemon, nor was I attempting to do any sort of minimum battles run either. But here we are. Anyway, Tyranitar's cool. It's got some great attack, the same physical attacking stat of Dragonite. However, it's sacrificing speed for a higher physical defensive stat. But that doesn't make Tyranitar a slouch, as its base stat total is clocking in at the same 600, making it part of the pseudo-legendary club. However, Tyranitar's mixture of rock dark typing mean that it's got a ton of weaknesses. Just look at it. There are a bunch of gym leaders in the game who could really wail on Tyranitar, and we'll be feeling that pain in the run. But before we dig into Tyranitar's moves, let's take a look at the rules. Rule number 1 is that we can only use Tyranitar in battle, but we can capture other Pokemon for HM butler purposes. Number 2 is we can't use items in battle, held items are fine. And number 3 is a minimum battles run is defined as only battling the trainers / engaging in encounters that prohibit us from progressing the game. I've marked them all in a spreadsheet in the description. Like most third stage evolution Pokemon and pseudo legendaries to boot, it's usually quite some time before you start learning powerful moves. It's kind of true in Tyranitar's case, but it does get Rock Slide and Thrash relatively early on, with the former being particularly useful. Its TM pool does have access to several powerful moves, the most important for us being Earthquake. But with access to things like Iron Tail, Dragon Breath, Fire Blast, and even Surf, it's a lot better than some of the other Pokemon I've attempted this with. With that out of the way, we can start the game. There's nothing too revolutionary going on here. We replace Cyndaquil with Tyranitar before buffing its IVs in an editor as per usual. Then, after paying Mr. Pokemon a visit, we run into our first rival battle. At level 5, Tyranitar starts with Bite, Leer, Sandstorm, and Screech. However, with Tyranitar's impressive attacking stat, Bite can take out the Totodile in just 2 hits. From here, it's the usual shenanigans on the way to Falkner and our first badge, and I'm not expecting too much resistance from Birdman. Going in with a safety berry, we're at level 7. We start with Bite, and even though Pidgey gets off a Mud Slap, it goes down pretty fast. Having a feeling that Mud Slap would start to get annoying, I take advantage of Darude to start shaving off the Pidgeot's health. Combining this with Bite, as well as the healing power of the berry, it's not long before we've secured our first Triumph victory against Falkner. Our first gym badge in hand, we grab the egg and head to Azalea Town. Not much to say about Slowpoke Well, but I do anticipate Bugsy being a bit of a challenge, so in this instance I decide to tackle the rival first. At level 11, Bite is more than enough to take down Ghastly, however the rival's Croconaw might bring some issues. It's faster than us and Water Gun doles out some decent damage. Our Bite is pretty pathetic, doing about a 1/6 of Croconaw's health. Its next Water Gun brings us down to 13 HP, and when we attack with Bite, we get crit but not flinch. The berry heals us to 23 HP, another Water Gun takes us down to 6 HP, and then our very next Bite results in another crit, which is some pretty crazy luck. Still at 6 HP for the Zubat, we use Bite and it does over half. Zubat retaliates with a Leech Life, taking us down to 1 HP. Another Bite probably won't finish this thing off unless we get yet another crit. I don't even want to think about the odds of that happening. Either way, we've won, which means Bugsy is up next. We're now at level 13 and against the Metapod there's not too much to fear. However, I do set up a Sandstorm to get any help I can against the Cypher. Instead of Bugsy sending it out second, he opts to send out Cypher last. Its Fury Cutter is super effective and is only going to build in damage, and even though we start doing some half decent damage against it, it's not long before we're KO'd. A couple of tries later, I've managed to get some timings down. Metapod is defeated much the same way, even getting a crit, but my plan is to now use Sandstorm a little later so that we can get the maximum number of turns against Cypher. When Kakuna comes out, we use Bite, leaving it on red bar. Kakuna then flinches, we use Sandstorm, and after it then uses Harden, the chip damage knocks it out. For Scyther, it's obviously quicker, but I start with the bites. Chances are, even with Sandstorm and Bite, we're going to need a little luck, and it comes in the form of a Fury Cut and Miss, which eventually allows us to take out Scyther. Next up is Whitney, and I'm not as scared of her as I have been in previous runs given our typing. The first time in, we're at level 16, and while I have picked up moves like Dig, I'm not switching up Tyranitar's move pool just yet. We go for a Bite on Clefairy, which will end up making this battle a 3-turn defeat. When Clefairy is close to being knocked out, I do set up Sandstorm, knowing I'll need every point of damage against the Miltank. With that out of the way, Miltank comes out and gets some of its health chipped away before it uses rollout that does meh damage. Our Bite isn't half bad, but it could still be pretty precarious. When Miltank gets close enough to dangerously low health, I'm expecting it to use Milk Drink, but it instead sticks with rollout, leaving us on 13 HP and then allowing us to take it out, making Whitney another first try victory. Not had one of those in a while. For the Burn Tower rival, I don't bother trying to head there first upon reaching Equatique because I know that Haunter will definitely outspeed us. Instead, I head straight to the Kimono Sisters to gain some levels. At level 20 against the Haunter, we're of course going for Bite, and of course, Haunter is going for Curse. Yeah, that isn't going to work. There's nothing to do but reset a few times until we get some more favourable luck and teach Tyranitar Dig in the process. Haunter starts off the battle with Lick, so we go and Bite, which is a one-shot. When Croconaw comes out, for some reason it hits us with Rage first, before then resorting to Water Gun to actually do some damage. However, a few bites later and we're able to defeat it and come up against Magnemite. This is why we have Dig, which results in a one-shot. Then we have his final Pokemon, Zubat, which is defeated pretty easily. With the rival out of the way, we're going to target Morty next. With our combo of Bite and Dig, nothing should prove to be too difficult. For Morty's first Ghastly, we rely on Bite for a one-shot, then when Haunter comes out, we can go for the same strat. We then don't see Morty's Gengar next, with the second Haunter instead, most probably because Tyranitar resists ghost moves. Either way, it's no problem. We don't end up getting put to sleep, not that Gengar even tries, and it ends up being another first try victory. However, it can't all be smooth sailing, and next up is a gym leader that I was most worried about, Chuck. As it turns out, it's not so much him I should be worried about, but more so his peons. The very first battle when you enter Samwood Gym is against two trainers. The left has a Hitmonlee while the right has a Hitmonchan, and you have to face them both in succession. Right off the bat, when we enter the battle and get hit with a high jump kick, it's a one shot. No ifs, buts or coconuts there. We ain't getting past this thing. So what kinds of choices do we have? Well, during many casual runs, you usually leave the Lake of Rage and Rockets until later on. But there's nothing actually stopping you from going there before Samwood and Olivine. While we're up at the Lake of Rage, we can pick up the TM for Detect, which may come in handy. And because we're here, we might as well do that portion of the story. So I capture the Gyarados and then clear out the Rocket hideout because gaining some extra levels can't hurt. Now, whether I was being stubborn or stupid, those two often intersect, I can't remember. But I didn't end up teaching Detect to Tyranitar and instead go back to the battle at a simply higher level. But I didn't end up teaching Detect to Tyranitar and instead go into the battle at simply a higher level. It does allow us to go first with Bite, and we are at a sufficiently high enough level to tank a high jump kick from Hitmonlee, allowing us to eventually defeat it. And despite being at 12 HP for Hitmonchan, Thrash is powerful enough to one-shot it. With the biggest roadblocks out of the way, we continue to Chuck. For his Primeape, I stick with Thrash, and it's just shy of knocking it out. We then get hit with Leer before our second Thrash KOs it. We enter the fight with Poliwrath confused and then hit ourselves in confusion. Thankfully, Poliwrath's Dynamic Punch misses. Wonder why I didn't use Surf or Lock on there. Either way, the second time Poliwrath lines up the move, it doesn't miss, and our 4 times weakness to fighting shines through. It doesn't take too many battles to come out on top though. It turns out that Thrash at our level is a range for the Primeape. After it's defeated, we're sticking with Thrash against Poliwrath, which is still dead set on using Dynamic Punch against us, despite it continually missing. 3 misses then gives us free reign to hammer on the Thrashes and eventually knock it out. Jasmine's next purely because I wanted to see how I'd stack up against her Steelix. Against the Magnemite, of course, we still have Dig and can easily one-shot it. Steelix, however, has some pretty impenetrable defenses, so I'm not pinning my hopes on Dig doing the job. The move probably does around 1/4 of Steelix's health, and we do get some lucky misses with Iron Tail. However, it's not long before we're putting Steelix into healing range, and when Iron Tail starts hitting us, we get flattened pretty swiftly. But we do have a fairly easy path to victory. It just means teaching Tyranitar Surf. On the next go around, we're still sticking with Dig for Magnemite. Then for Steelix, we're going straight for Surf. We're getting much better damage ranges now. Pair that with an Iron Tail miss and we can easily knock the Steelix out in 2 hits. That leaves us with Jasmine's final Magnemite, which ends up falling just like the first. Now we can finally slip and slide on over to Pryce. First time in against the Seal, we don't have anything particularly effective, so I stick with Rock Slide and its raw power. Tyranitar's attack and the stab bonus are more than enough to knock it out. We've still got Surf from Jasmine, so when Piloswine's out next, we line on one of those and do some major damage. Pryce then chooses to use Fury Attack, which inflicts pathetic damage, followed up by a Hyper Potion, but at this point it's already over. 2 more Surfs and we've not only defeated Piloswine, but leveled up in the process. For the final Dugong, it's of course an Ice type and we have Rock Slide, which makes this whole thing an Oko. Once we've cleaned up the rest of the mandatory story stuff, we're left to head to Blackthorn and try our luck with Clair. By now we're level 41. We've still got Bite, Dig, Surf and Rock Slide. Nothing too crazy, and this battle may see us leaning on raw damage output rather than super effective moves. For the first Dragonair, we kick things off with a Rock Slide, which comes oh so close to knocking it out. When Dragonair then goes for its signature Thunder Wave, we fortunately get the miss before finishing it off with Bite. Next, we've got Kingdra, and this thing has Surf. We outspeed it and use Rock Slide that not only takes it past the halfway mark, but also causes it to flinch. We line up another Rock Slide, and that's Kingdra dealt with. We just have the 2 Dragonairs left, and then nothing to write home about. Both can be KO'd with Rock Slide, and even though we get paralysed and can't attack for a few turns, it ends up not making too much of a difference in the end. Well, a first try victory with Clair. Aside from the minor speed bump with one of Chuck's trainers, Tyranitar, for all its weaknesses, has been absolutely blasting through this challenge. One thing we absolutely must do before we head to the Elite Four is pick up Earthquake from within Victory Road. It is of course effective against a number of Pokemon we'll be battling, but its sheer attacking force makes it pretty essential for dealing with Pokemon that it's only regularly effective against. Aside from that, there's not a whole lot of prep required before facing off with the Elite Four. Will's up first and we've got some good answers to a number of his Pokemon. We're at level 43 now, and for the first Xatu, no points for guessing which move we're going with. While we do get confused because the Xatu is quicker, it's not too long before we can get for Rock Slide. When, strangely enough, Executor comes out, we've still got Bite from way back when, and it does some solid damage. Executor frustratingly goes with Reflect, but it won't end up saving it. Jinx, as you'd expect, is quicker than us, but its Ice Punch isn't too effective. Even though Reflect is up, Rock Slide still easily one-shots it. For Slowbro, we've still got Bite, and that only takes 2 chomps for it to be defeated. Then we level up to 44, ready for the final Xatu, which gets a bunch of rocks on its head. First try victory against Will. For Koga, we'll just see how we get on for now. For the Ariados, we're able to lean on Tyranitar's awesome attacking and just use Bite a couple of times. Forretress, however, can be pretty annoying. Surf isn't doing a whole lot of damage, and every time we're trying to use Dig, it'll end up using Protect. And we don't want to put it in a range where it could potentially use Self-Destruct. In the end, I go for Bite and then follow it up with Surf so that we can get through the round relatively unscathed. Muck's bulky and I can already see the minimizers coming. While I probably should have taught Earthquake to Tyranitar to deal with this, I've still got Dig. While it does okay damage and we eventually defeat Muck, we could have employed some better strats there. However, we get through and onto Crobat. Then the shenanigans start happening. Of course, Crobat's going to spam Double Team, pair that with Rock Slides, lower accuracy, and we're struggling to hit it. Not only that, Toxic comes out and we're poisoned. However, despite all that, we do get through it and to Venomoth. We hit Venomoth with a Rock Slide and get the Oko. All in all, Koga was pretty easy and there's clear room for improvement. Now let's talk about Bruno. Here's the trainer I was worried about. Tyranitar has a 4 times weakness to fighting, not good. and I'm not quite sure how to handle the Hitmontop first. I go for Surf, but it's not terribly effective. Hitmontop then uses Dig, so I end up digging, which of course means that Hitmontop will then fire off a Protect. While this carries on for a few rounds, we do make it through to the Hitmonlee without taking any damage. I go for Surf, even though I probably should have gone with Dig to dodge the high jump kick, and boy does that move do some damage. From full, we're then on 30 HP. Sensing the end is nigh, I do go for Dig just in case, and we end up knocking out Hitmonlee. But with Hitmonchan up next, I can sense the Mag Punch in our future. We get it, it's super effective, and we're KO'd. Bruno ends up becoming a wall once again, even in a situation where I teach Tyranitar Earthquake. While we can one-shot Hitmonlee, when Hitmonchan comes out, it's always going to get 2 Mag Punches off on us, which takes us well below half HP. Then, for the level 46 Machamp, there's no way that we can survive its cross chop. I tried the battle several times in the hopes that something will change, but it's just not working out. We're just too weak fighting against Pokemon to be able to make it through without coming up with another plan. Ultimately, there is no great other plan. It's just a case of relying on luck. While I do end up teaching Tyranitar Earthquake on repeat runs through the Elite Four, I also teach it Iron Tail. Against the Machamp, we have no choice but to rely on Cross Chop missing, and then rely on Iron Tail's damage. Against Hitmontop, we have Earthquake, mix that up with a crit, and Hitmontop goes down. We're quicker than the Hitmonlee and can use another Earthquake to knock it out. For Hitmonchan, there's no way we're getting through this battle without taking 2 Mag Punches, so we just have to suck it up. They do some hefty damage, leaving us on just 41 HP for the Machamp. Onix is obviously no problem at all because of Earthquake, so we now have 1 Pokemon remaining. Our first Iron Tail hits, taking the Machamp just below half HP. It goes for Cross Chop and thankfully misses, so as long as Iron Tail doesn't miss, Bruno is defeated. For Karen, we shouldn't have too much to worry about. Our Dark typing means that none of her Pokemon should really trouble us. We also have great physical attack, so here's hoping she cooperates. Turns out that Karen doesn't want to play ball. Umbreon is, as we all know by now, rather bulky, and neither our Iron Tails or Earthquakes are taking it past half HP. Despite getting confused and an attempted sanding, we are still able to knock it out. For a change, instead of Gengar next, we get Vileplume. Right off the bat, Vileplume hits us with Stun Spore. It also has the super effective Petal Dance and is happy to shred through our HP. So, when we eventually defeat it, we're on 25 HP and we're paralysed. Houndoom comes out, it's quicker, it uses Flamethrower, we're defeated. Much like Bruno, it just takes time. Against the Umbreon, we get into a battle where it chooses to use Faint Attack instead of going with either Sand Attack or Confuse Ray. So we make it through the Vileplume on a fair bit of health. Vileplume gets sent out and we pop off an Earthquake and get a crit, so there's no risk of us getting paralysed or taking damage from Petal Dance. The rest of the battle with Karen then becomes pretty trivial. Though Houndoom is quicker, we have Earthquake and that's always going to be an OHKO. Murkrow will then go down to a Rock Slide, then for Gengar, we've got another Earthquake. The champion now awaits. I'm honestly not too worried about Lance, and Rock Slide is the reason why. It's super effective against all of his Pokemon, and outside of an Aerodactyl that can outspeed us, his Pokemon don't really have any damaging moves. With Gyarados first, we line up a Rock Slide, which is super effective and takes it down in 1. Aerodactyl, as we said, is quicker and uses its own Rock Slide against us. The damage output isn't great and we're not flinched, so can pay it back with our own Rock Slide. When the first Dragonite raises its head, we are just shy of the OHKO, but we do get the flinch, so down it goes. Then, instead of another level 47 Dragonite, Lance tosses out his big boy level 50 Dragonite, but the story stays the same. Even though it takes 2 hits, we're still getting by with some decent health to face the Charizard. However, Charizard pops off a Flamethrower first, which results in us getting burned. Not only is our damage output lowered, but we're now on a timer for the rest of the battle. While Charizard does get defeated, we still have 1 Dragonite left, and we're at 72 HP. No way this is going to be a one-shot. And it's certainly not a one-shot when Tyranitar misses with Rock Slide. We take the burn damage and Dragonite follows up with Thunder, which somehow misses. The next time we go for a Rock Slide, it hits, but just look at how much less damage it's doing because of the burn. We're on 28 HP. Can we make it? Not when Thunder ends up hitting us. So close. Next time around, events work out more in our favour. Gyarados still goes down in 1 hit, But next up, we see the level 50 Dragonite. We're still on the same game plan and just need to keep hammering on with those rock slides to get through Lance's team. This time around, we're not getting burned, we're not getting paralyzed, we're just slicing through his Pokemon until we emerge victorious. So the Elite Four is done and we're the champion. But there's still the ultimate test awaiting Tyranitar. However, we've still got some more gym leaders to grind through and I'm doubting any of them are really going to cause us a problem. Because we get off the SS Aqua in Vermilion, it makes the most sense to start with Surge, as we've got Earthquake. As you might expect, none of his Pokemon are able to do anything against us and we effectively sweep his entire team. We head on up to Saffron where Sabrina is, and after spending far too long on the teleporters in a gym, we eventually reach her. Not only are we resistant to her Pokemon, we also have Crunch, so can absolutely decimate her team of defensively weak Psychic Pokemon. I could save Erica for a while because she actually may be able to dole out some punishment, but we've got several levels on her, so it's worth at least a shot. The first round, it starts off not great. Against Tangela, I went with Earthquake, not the smartest play. We end up getting Giga Drained in response. By the time I've converted to Crunch, which isn't one-shotting a Pokemon, you've got things like Sunny Day happening, Solar Beams firing, it's just a recipe for a whooping. Trying Erica again, we just keep going with Crunch and hope things turn out a little better. In the end, while not a great strat, it ends up doing just enough to see us through to victory. Next, however, we play it safe with Janine. We've got Earthquake and that lets us sail through her underleveled and generally weak lineup of Pokemon. Even though it may have made more sense to leave Misty for later given our weakness, we still do have Crunch, so it's worth a shot. Crunch doesn't knock Golduck out, but it comes close and our sheer level of discrepancy lets us survive getting hit with the Surf. Quagsire ain't too bright and decides to use Amnesia instead of Surf, meaning we can get by in a couple of rounds without taking damage. For Lapras and its Ice typing, we've got Rock Slide. Despite its bulk, we end up sinking it, leaving just Starmie. Starmie is able to outspeed us and use Surf, but its weak physical defense is no match for Crunch. For Brock, there's Earthquake. We just need to switch things up with the Surf every so often until we've gotten through his entire team. Now we've got 2 gym leaders left and have no choice but to go Surf into Fine Blame. Much like Brock, this is a problem that Earthquake is capable of solving fairly easily, and so far none of the leaders have been anything much to write home about. Will Blue end up being different? Pidgeotto is out first as is tradition. Though it's quicker, we have Rock Slide, which is good for the Oko. I purposely equipped Tyranitar with leftovers to try and get back some health too. Rhydon unfortunately does take a couple of hits to be defeated and can output some decent damage before being swapped into Gyarados. Pretty rare thing to see. Blue playing 4D chess because we've already selected Earthquake, which then misses. Still, Rock Slide doesn't miss and all the swapping has allowed us to recoup some much needed HP. Rhydon's then defeated, and when Blue chucks out Executor, we've got Crunch waiting for it. Blue now has 2 Pokemon remaining and chooses the Arcanine. While I was expecting an extreme speed, Arcanine goes Flamethrower, and wouldn't you just know it, we get burned. We get a little payback in the form of a crit Earthquake, and despite our burn, I reckon Alakazam will still go down to a Crunch. Turns out that it does, and that is a first try victory on Blue, been getting a fair number of them this run. With all that done, there's one final test remaining in Red. I forego giving it a shot without rare candies because I've seen how that turns out enough times. And to be honest, I'm feeling a little confident about this battle. We've got some good move coverage and decent attack, so I reckon we may have an easier time than in previous runs. With Pikachu out first, it has no chance of standing up against Earthquake. However, when Venusaur is sent out, I soon realised that I was perhaps a little too overconfident in Tyranitar's abilities. Once Venusaur lines up that Solar Beam, and we're not doing enough damage in between its charge, it ends up taking up a ton of HP. Suffice it to say, a few turns later and we are KO'd. I tried the battle a few more times just to see if our luck changes, and it does not. But there is a move I've got just for this occasion, and that move is Detect. We can simply use Detect in between Venusaur's uses of Solar Beam and it should be smooth sailing, right? And hey, look at that. We ended up defeating Venusaur no problem. Alright, let's move on to the next Pokemon. And it's Blastoise. Okay, let's see how we get on here. Earthquake's not great damage wise. Blastoise then uses Rain Dance. I see where this is going. This may not be great. Blastoise uses Surf, and that is all of our health gone. We now have a new problem. How exactly are we supposed to solve this one? It's not like we can detect our way out of it. Like most battles with red and the level discrepancy, we need to find a way to bring the hurt. At one point, I take some inspiration from my previous Dragonite run and teach Tyranitar Fury Cutter. However, it ends up being a little too unreliable because Tyranitar can't tank thunders as well as Dragonite could. So I eventually abandon it. But all hope isn't lost quite yet. We still have the all reliable curse to raise our defense and attack. At first, I tried this method as I previously did, with trying to set up on the Pikachu, but that's not really viable for the same reason we can't set up Fury Cutter. We're taking too much damage. However, if we combine a couple of strats, namely I detect one with Curse, then we may be in business. With this method, we can deal with Pikachu by using Earthquake, then when Venusaur comes out, we're setting up Curse on one turn and then using Detect on the other. This allows us to max out our attack and be in a position at full health where Blastoise would want to set up a Rain Dance so that it's able to OHKO us with Surf. Then we're just relying on Rock Slide to do the majority of the heavy lifting. When a Pokemon like Espeon comes out, even though we don't have Crunch, it can't do much apart from set up Reflect. And our attack is so high, even with it, Earthquake can still take it out. Even when we're up against Snorlax and being a little cheeky by going for another Curse, we can tank the Body Slams. Though we end up getting paralyzed for good measure, we can still just use Earthquake twice to knock it out. Finally, we have the Charizard. We're on decent health. It thankfully uses Flamethrower, but it can't burn us. We just have to line up a Rock Slide, hit it, and that spells the end of the battle with red. So much easier than previous battles. Well, that whole run ended up being a lot quicker than I thought possible. With Tyranitar's weaknesses, I was sure it was going to be a bigger roadblock than it turned out to be. You've got a decent move pool that unlocks some of the more difficult battles along with solid attack, allowing you to just bring the hurt to most of your opponents standing in your way. I knew Tyranitar was one of my favourites for a reason, but hey, maybe you could have made the run even easier. Feel free to let me know, and I've also included a list of all the trainers I fought and their locations in the description if you're interested. If you have an idea for an interesting run in the same style, let me know, and if you want to like or subscribe, go for it. Until next time, have a good one.